At a seemingly ordinary gas station, an encounter between a veteran Air Force lieutenant and a police officer escalates into a harrowing ordeal. What starts as a tense standoff quickly spirals into an agonizing confrontation as Officer Jake's prejudices cloud his judgment, leading to the brutal use of pepper spray on Lieutenant Jacob. Despite Jacob's calm attempts to de-escalate the situation, he is subjected to violence and humiliation. The disturbing incident gained widespread attention, prompting an urgent intervention by General Robert Mitchell and Captain Emma Carter, who are determined to uncover the truth and address deeper issues of bias within the police force. As the case unfolds, the stark reality of prejudice and the need for justice come into sharp focus, with the potential to expose systemic corruption and drive significant change. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. The atmosphere at the gas station was thick with tension, a palpable silence that seemed ready to erupt at any moment. The erratic flashes from the police cruiser's lights cast surreal, jittery shadows on the pavement, making the scene appear as though it had leaped from the pages of a nightmare. Jacob, trapped inside a black sub with his seatbelt cinched tightly across his chest, sat rigidly, his apprehension mounting with every passing second. He watched Officer Jake with mounting unease, fully aware that any sudden or misunderstood movement could result in a tragic outcome. With deliberate care, he kept his hands visible and his gestures minimal, trying to avoid any actions that could be misinterpreted. Officer Jake, however, was ensnared by a storm of prejudices clouding his judgment. Despite seeing Jacob's military uniform, a nagging disbelief festered within him. The black man seated before him could not possibly be the veteran Air Force lieutenant he appeared to be. Doubt intertwined with fear, and the fear swiftly morphed into aggressive hostility. Jake's mind raced with irrational thoughts spurred by his escalating anxiety. "I'm not asking again, get out of the car now." Jake's voice erupted, strained and trembling with barely contained fury. His demand was sharp and imperious, but Jacob's cautious, non-threatening demeanor only served to exacerbate Jake's paranoia. Why isn't he getting out? What is he hiding? These frenzied questions churned relentlessly in Jake's mind. Jacob, fully aware of the precariousness of the situation, responded with a calm, measured tone. "I'm not moving while you're pointing that gun at me. I don't want you to think I'm reaching for a weapon or anything like that." Though Jacob's words were intended to diffuse the tension, they only deepened Jake's distrust. The officer felt sweat bead on his forehead as he gripped his gun tighter. His frustration mounted as Jacob's refusal to exit the vehicle was perceived as a challenge. In his heightened state, Jake decided to escalate the situation, convinced that it was necessary to force Jacob's compliance. "I think you can challenge me," Jake muttered under his breath, his voice low but edged with menace. He turned his gaze to his colleague, Officer Sean, who stood nearby by the cruiser, closely observing the escalating encounter. "Hand me the pepper spray now." Sean hesitated briefly, weighing the gravity of the situation, but Jake's command was unmistakable. With a nod, Sean quickly retrieved the canister of pepper spray and handed it over. Jacob, still keeping his hands visible through the driver's side window, was trying to convey his non-threatening intentions. "Last chance, get out of the car." Jake's voice rang out again, now holding the pepper spray in his right hand and his gun in his left. Jacob's heart raced as he sensed the impending threat. Before he could voice another protest, Jake aimed and discharged the pepper spray, unleashing a stinging cloud directly into Jacob's face. The instant impact was searing, as if Jacob's face was engulfed in flames. His eyes watered uncontrollably, vision distorting into a painful blur as the pepper spray's chemicals penetrated his skin and mucous membranes, igniting an invisible inferno. "Damn it!" Jacob's muffled cry of pain was lost in the cacophony of the moment. He attempted to wipe his eyes, but the intense burning rendered him nearly helpless. Overcome by a surge of panic, he struggled to free himself from his seatbelt, his movements clumsy and frantic against the rising tide of pain and fear. "Now get out of the car!" Jake shouted with a tone of triumph, as though he had finally broken Jacob's resolve. Despite the blinding effects of the pepper spray, Jacob fumbled with the door handle, his hand shaking uncontrollably. He managed to force the door open and began to stagger out of the vehicle, struggling to orient himself. His vision was completely obscured by the burning spray, rendering the officers in front of him little more than indistinct shadows. The searing pain in his eyes made it nearly impossible to maintain his balance, and each step felt like a battle against his failing coordination. Once Jacob was outside the car, Jake wasted no time. He charged forward and, without a moment's hesitation, grabbed Jacob by the neck and slammed him onto the ground. "Hands behind your back!" Jake barked, his voice filled with an authoritative intensity that bordered on cruelty. The lieutenant attempted to resist, but the effects of the pepper spray had drained his strength, making any effort futile. Sion quickly joined in, and together they overpowered Jacob, forcing him down with a brutal force. Jacob's body was forcibly pressed against the cold, rough asphalt, his arms contorted behind him as Jake used his knee to pin Jacob's back. Waves of pain radiated through Jacob's spine, but the burning sensation from the pepper spray overwhelmed any coherent thought. "Stay down," Jake growled, his voice dripping with an abusive power. Sion, more subdued yet resolute, struggled to fasten the handcuffs around Jacob's wrists. Jacob's heavy breathing and the visible effort to control his body were evident, but he was completely at their mercy. The combined weight of the two officers pressing down on him, coupled with the excruciating burn, made it unmistakably clear that resistance was futile. "What's this guy's problem?" Sion panted, finally locking the cuffs with a sharp, final click. He glanced at Jake, seeking some form of reassurance or direction, but Jake's face remained contorted with unbridled rage. Jake quickly stood up, roughly yanking Jacob by the handcuffed arms. Jacob gasped for air, his body trembling from the dual assault of the burning spray and the pain in his back. Despite his physical state, his mind clung to fragments of dignity. "I'm an Air Force lieutenant," he muttered to himself, trying to preserve a sense of self amidst the overwhelming humiliation. "Get up," Jake ordered, his voice still sharp, pulling Jacob with unnecessary force. Jacob struggled to stand, his eyes tightly shut as tears mixed with the sweat streaming down his face. The agony was intense, but he understood that any additional resistance would only exacerbate his situation. His mind raced in confusion and disbelief. How had a simple misunderstanding escalated into such a violent confrontation? As Jake and Sion dragged Jacob towards the cruiser, the tension in the air grew almost palpable. Sion, despite his attempts to carry out his perceived duties, began to experience a troubling sense of doubt. Is this going too far, he wondered internally, but he remained silent. Is he resisting? Jake's cold query interrupted his thoughts as he sensed Jacob's slight hesitation. "I can't breathe right," Jacob gasped, his voice ragged from the pain and exhaustion. "That's because you're flailing," Jake snapped back harshly, dismissing the obvious distress in Jacob's voice. The trio arrived at the cruiser, and with a rough shove, Jake pressed Jacob against the hood, applying excessive force. Sion opened the rear door, preparing to push Jacob into the back seat. Adrenaline coursed through the officers, but for different reasons. Jake was consumed by a fierce need to assert dominance, driven by a toxic mix of prejudice and authority. Meanwhile, Sion began to grapple with an unsettling internal conflict, questioning the legitimacy of their actions. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. The gas station, now shrouded in a tense and oppressive atmosphere, was dimly lit by the flashing lights of the police cruiser. The sight of Jacob handcuffed and suffering from the pepper spray became a grim symbol of the night's events. Jake and Sion, having enacted their harsh approach, were about to transport Jacob to the nearest station. The weight of their actions hung heavy in the air, creating an atmosphere thick with the anticipation of the unfolding consequences. Jacob, still gasping and with his eyes swollen from the pepper spray, was helped into the back of the cruiser by Sion, who was left to wrestle with his own conflicted emotions. Jake, wearing an expression of strained determination, took control of the steering wheel and drove with a sense of duty that he struggled to maintain. The severity of the situation weighed heavily on him, becoming more apparent with each passing mile. The car's interior was enveloped in a thick, palpable silence, only occasionally broken by the intermittent, muffled sobs of Jacob, whose cries were growing more irregular as the journey continued. Seeking to alleviate the oppressive quiet, Jake attempted to strike up a conversation. "How are you holding up, Lieutenant?" he asked, striving to keep his voice light and nonchalant, though it betrayed the underlying tension. Jacob, his eyes stinging and his body racked with persistent pain, hesitated before responding. The silence stretched, filled with the hum of the engine and the subdued sounds of the car's interior. Finally, Jacob's voice, hoarse and laden with emotion, broke through the stillness. "You know this isn't right, don't you?" Jake chose not to answer immediately. Instead, he fixed his gaze on the road ahead, his thoughts a maelstrom of doubt and internal conflict. The weight of the situation bore down on him, making it increasingly difficult to reconcile his actions with his sense of duty. Besides Jacob, Sion sat in troubled silence, his gaze fixed on the floor. He too was grappling with his conscience, deeply unsettled by the events of the night. As the car drove on, the situation was rapidly evolving outside of their immediate bubble. Social media was ablaze with footage, and first-hand accounts of Jacob's mistreatment. The videos and reports of the violent encounter spread like wildfire, igniting widespread outrage across various digital platforms. The story, propelled by the growing uproar, reached the upper echelons of government. The situation escalated to such an extent that it landed on the desk of General Robert Mitchell, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. General Mitchell, a distinguished figure in his mid-50s with a commanding presence and a reputation for unwavering authority, received an urgent briefing about the incident involving Jacob. After reviewing the disturbing footage and the detailed reports, his concern quickly evolved into a steely resolve. The gravity of the situation was clear. It had transcended mere misconduct and had become a matter of significant concern for the honor and integrity of the armed forces. Determined to address the crisis with the seriousness it demanded, Mitchell took immediate action. He ordered a convoy of high-ranking military officers and security personnel to accompany him to the station where Jacob was being held. The formation of the convoy, complete with an array of military vehicles and personnel, underscored the gravity of the visit. Mitchell and his team departed in a heavily guarded official vehicle, fully aware that their arrival would convey the critical nature of the situation. When General Mitchell's entourage arrived at the station, the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of apprehension and surprise. The officers on duty, taken aback by the unexpected arrival of a military convoy, struggled to maintain their composure. Mitchell and his team disembarked with an authoritative demeanor that left no room for question. "This is General Mitchell," he declared, his voice resonating with authority and clarity. "I am here to inquire about the status of Lieutenant Jacob. Where is he being held?" The duty officer, visibly intimidated by the imposing presence of the general and his entourage, quickly nodded and responded, "The lieutenant is currently in a holding cell. I will escort you there." Mitchell followed the officer through the station, his team maintaining a respectful yet vigilant distance. The general was acutely aware of the importance of remaining composed and ensuring that all procedures were adhered to with both military and legal precision. In the holding cell, Jacob sat alone on a bench, his head bowed in dejection, his hands still restrained by cuffs. The lingering effects of the pepper spray were gradually fading, but the overwhelming sense of humiliation and anger persisted. As the door to the cell creaked open, Jacob looked up. Through his teary eyes, he saw General Mitchell enter. The general's commanding presence seemed to shift the atmosphere in the room, infusing it with a sense of relief and anticipation. Mitchell approached Jacob with a look of genuine concern, his authoritative presence tempered by a palpable empathy. "I'm General Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying an air of reassurance and authority. "We're here to understand what transpired and to ensure that you are treated with the respect and fairness you deserve." Jacob, his face etched with pain and exhaustion but also illuminated by a glimmer of hope, looked up at the general. "General, thank you for coming," he said, his voice filled with both gratitude and relief. Mitchell signaled for the accompanying soldiers to maintain a respectful distance before taking a seat next to Jacob. "We'll address this issue and get it resolved, but first we need to understand what happened. Are you able to recount the details of the incident?" Jacob nodded slowly, his movements and demeanor revealing the profound emotional and physical strain from the recent ordeal. "Yes, General," he said with a subdued voice. "Officer Jake didn't believe I was a lieutenant. He thought I was resisting arrest, so he used pepper spray on me." General Mitchell listened with unwavering attention, his face growing stern as he absorbed the gravity of Jacob's account. The narrative of mistreatment and disregard for his rank was deeply troubling. He understood that Jacob's testimony was a crucial starting point in addressing the misconduct and ensuring a fair resolution. As Jacob detailed the sequence of events, Mitchell took diligent notes and maintained steady eye contact, signaling his commitment to addressing the matter thoroughly. This was only the initial step in a longer process, one that would require extensive investigation and scrutiny. But Mitchell was resolute in his determination to secure justice for Lieutenant Jacobs and reveal the truth. The general's presence marked the beginning of a more intricate journey toward uncovering the underlying biases and systemic issues that had led to this situation. Jacob was acutely aware that the struggle for justice was far from over, and the complexities of the case were just starting to unfold. Inside the cold and silent detention room at the police station, General Mitchell's arrival brought an intense focus to the atmosphere. Jacob, seated at the table with his handcuffs removed but still visibly marked by the humiliation, recounted his experience with a mixture of pain and frustration. Mitchell, seated beside him, listened with deep concentration, each of Jacob's words echoing the profound injustice he had faced. "So what exactly happened with Officer Jake?" Mitchell inquired, his tone firm yet empathetic. "You mentioned he didn't believe you were a lieutenant. Do you have any idea why he reacted in such a way?" Jacob let out a weary sigh, the remnants of the previous night's distress evident in his every movement. "I'm not sure, General. Maybe he saw my uniform and couldn't accept that I was who I claimed to be, or perhaps his own biases clouded his judgment. Regardless of the reason, he was resolute in treating me as if I were a threat." Mitchell promptly jotted down notes, his gaze never wavering from Jacob. He understood the importance of gathering a comprehensive account to handle the situation with the seriousness it warranted. "What we need to do now is review the entire situation thoroughly. The General's involvement signals that we're committed to addressing this issue seriously. To prevent future incidents and understand all the nuances of this case, I'll need a complete and detailed account from you." Jacob nodded in acknowledgement, appreciative of the gravity with which the General was approaching the matter. "I understand. I'm prepared to cooperate fully." As their discussion progressed, a new figure began to make her presence felt at the police station. Captain Emma Carter, a highly respected investigator from internal affairs, arrived with a determined and focused demeanor. Summoned urgently to join the investigation, Emma was known for her meticulous and impartial approach, making her an excellent choice to handle the complex case at hand. Her entrance into the room was marked by a sense of authority and purpose. Mitchell stood to greet her, offering a respectful nod. "Captain Carter," he said, his voice carrying a tone of both formality and respect. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We're here to delve into all the details of the incident involving Lieutenant Jacob. How can we assist you in this matter?" Emma met Mitchell's gaze with a resolute expression. "General, I'm here to ensure that Lieutenant Jacob receives the justice he rightfully deserves. This case is an opportunity to tackle broader issues of bias and discrimination within the police force. I plan to oversee the investigation closely and ensure that every step is conducted with transparency. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time." Mitchell nodded, recognizing the critical role Emma would play. "Understood. Let's collaborate to ensure a fair and thorough resolution." As Emma and Mitchell outlined the next steps, Jacob found himself caught between hope and trepidation. The case was evolving into a complex web of challenges, with the involvement of high-profile figures like Captain Carter and General Mitchell introducing new dimensions to the investigation. There was a growing sense that the truth might soon be revealed, but Jacob was also acutely aware that numerous hurdles remained. Unbeknownst to him, his situation was on the brink of leading to unexpected revelations and further developments. Sarah Blake's presence, combined with Emma's relentless investigative approach, began to peel back layers of corruption and discrimination that linked Jacob's case to a vast network of injustices stretching far beyond the incident at the gas station. As Sarah and Emma dug deeper, they uncovered a troubling pattern of misconduct and bias that suggested the night's events were not an isolated occurrence but part of a broader, more insidious problem. Meanwhile, Jake and Cian, facing mounting pressure from the intensifying investigations, started to grasp the full scope of the potential consequences stemming from their handling of Jacob's case. They realized that their decisions could trigger repercussions far greater than they had initially anticipated. The imminent revelations promised to not only impact Jacob's life significantly, but also to expose a network of prejudice and corruption that could fundamentally challenge the integrity of the justice system. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as the night unfolded, setting the stage for a series of events destined to unearth uncomfortable truths and disrupt the status quo. Despite the ongoing turmoil and emotional strain, Jacob began to sense a glimmer of hope that justice might eventually prevail. His situation was becoming increasingly dire, and the police chief, acutely aware of the severity of the matter, orchestrated a duplicitous scheme to charge Jacob with contempt of authority to shield his officer from scrutiny. The chief manipulated the circumstances to frame the incident involving Jake as a direct affront to law enforcement, thus escalating the case to civil court. Caught in the crossfire of a media frenzy, Jacob found himself at the heart of a storm that extended beyond issues of contempt and delved into deeper layers of racial prejudice and systemic injustice. The police chief's calculated maneuvering had transformed the case into a battleground for broader societal issues, with Jacob as the unfortunate focal point. The gravity of Jacob's predicament became even more pronounced with the knowledge that a conviction could lead to severe disciplinary actions and potential expulsion from the Air Force. General Matthews, an esteemed mentor and supporter of Jacob, attempted to intervene, but his influence was constrained to the military realm. In the civil court, Matthews could only vouch for Jacob's character and military service, unable to mount a more substantial defense against the overwhelming bias in the courtroom. The case fell into the hands of Judge Samuel Clark, whose known leftist convictions and disdain for the military set a prejudiced tone for the proceedings. Clark perceived Jacob, an Air Force lieutenant, as a symbol of the very establishment he criticized, resulting in a judgment marred by inherent bias. Jacob braced himself for a tough battle, acutely aware that his career and honor were on the line while the specter of racial discrimination loomed large. Amid this turmoil, media coverage began to rally fervently behind Jacob. Reports highlighted the racial injustices and apparent manipulations at play, drawing public attention to the systemic issues embedded in the case. Jacob needed to harness this growing support to counterbalance the biases manifesting in the courtroom. In a somber meeting with his lawyer, Jacob expressed the depth of his struggle. "It's not just my career at stake here, it's my honor, the respect I've earned over the years. And now, because of the color of my skin, I'm seeing justice being twisted against me." His lawyer, a resolute and determined individual, responded with conviction, "Jacob, this is more than a legal battle, it's a fight for dignity and truth. We have the media and public opinion on our side, but we need more than that. We must demonstrate to the court that you are more than a target of prejudice. We need them to recognize your true worth and the integrity you represent." Jacob, staring out the office window, contemplated the uncertain future ahead. He understood that the real challenge lay in maintaining his faith and dignity amidst relentless adversity. The courtroom tension reached a boiling point as Judge Clark, under immense pressure from media coverage and public protests, exhibited visible irritation. The case had become a symbol of racial injustice, and Clark struggled to uphold impartiality. In a hurried and controversial decision, Clark sentenced Jacob to prison, dismissing the nuances of the case and the profound impact on the lieutenant's life. General Matthews, visibly outraged, approached the bench to confront Clark directly. "Judge Clark, I urge you to reconsider your decision. Jacob is a war veteran with a distinguished record of bravery and exemplary service. His conviction not only undermines justice but also disrespects the sacrifice he has made for our country. I request that you assess his situation with the sensitivity it warrants, given his experience and value." Clark's cold stare remained unmoved by Matthews' appeal, but public pressure continued to build. In response, Jacob's lawyer, recognizing the need to amplify the pressure, leaked a compelling video to the media. The footage depicted Jacob rescuing a wounded comrade in combat, showcasing his remarkable bravery and courage. The video sparked a wave of public empathy and outrage, further intensifying the call for justice and highlighting the stark contrast between Jacob's true character and the prejudiced portrayal of his case. Meanwhile, the police chief, deeply anxious about the potential exposure of his orchestrated scheme, had taken drastic measures to cover his tracks. He tampered with crucial evidence, specifically targeting the gas station footage that had the potential to exonerate Jacob. In a bid to erase any trace of the truth, he ensured that the footage, which could have proven Jacob's innocence, mysteriously disappeared. However, fate intervened in a way that the police chief hadn't anticipated. A customer at the gas station, a middle-aged man named Marcus, had witnessed the misconduct firsthand. Disturbed by the blatant abuse of power, Marcus had recorded the entire incident on his phone. Determined to see justice served, Marcus sought out Jacob's lawyer, understanding the gravity of the situation and the importance of bringing the truth to light. Marcus provided Jacob's lawyer with the video footage, which documented the officer's egregious behavior and the subsequent manipulation orchestrated by the police chief. This vital piece of evidence vividly illustrated the misconduct and deceit that had been at play. With this new and compelling evidence in hand, Jacob's lawyer presented the footage in court. The video, capturing the officer's abuse of power and the police chief's manipulation, was undeniable proof of the wrongful actions taken against Jacob. This evidence had a seismic impact on the case, turning it on its head and shifting the narrative dramatically. The media, ever hungry for scandal, quickly seized upon the new development. Reporters flocked to the streets, interviewing outraged citizens and scrutinizing the integrity of the judicial system. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Jacob's lawyer delivered a powerful and impassioned statement to the court. This footage is irrefutable proof that the truth has been perverted and distorted. The injustice my client has endured must not be overlooked. Jacob is not a criminal, but a hero who has been wronged. We demand nothing less than true justice. With the introduction of this new evidence and the escalating public pressure, the court was compelled to revisit the case. Judge Clark, now facing intense scrutiny and pressure from all sides, had no choice but to reevaluate his earlier decision. Jacob, although still deeply shaken, found a renewed sense of hope. This unexpected turn of events offered him a fresh opportunity to fight for justice and reclaim his honor. As he glanced at his lawyer and General Matthews, he felt a surge of gratitude and a renewed determination to confront the challenges ahead. The situation had dramatically evolved, and Jacob's struggle had gained unprecedented visibility. The fight for truth and justice had taken on new dimensions, with emerging alliances and fresh challenges. The pressure on Judge Samuel Clark and the police chief had reached a boiling point. The streets were now adorned with posters bearing the faces of the judge and the chief, accompanied by slogans like "Racist system will not stand." Television programs eagerly sought interviews with Jacob's wife, although the family, already strained by the intense pressure, initially hesitated. Eventually, Jacob's wife chose to speak out. Her interview was powerful and moving, filled with raw emotion as she recounted the suffering and injustice her family had endured. Her courage resonated deeply with the public, sparking an even greater wave of support. The media and social networks amplified the outrage, forcing a critical re-examination of the case. Clark, now cornered by overwhelming public opinion and the damning evidence circulating on social media, which included footage of Jacob being unjustly assaulted, had no option but to reverse his previous decision. He ordered Jacob's immediate release and the arrest of the two officers involved in the scandal. Jake, the officer whose actions had instigated the entire debacle, was expelled from the police force. The second officer, after presenting a defense that argued he had been misled by Jake, was held accountable but avoided expulsion. Instead, he was sentenced to prison, a significant concession given the circumstances. The day Jacob was released from custody marked a profound and celebratory turning point. As he emerged from the courthouse, he was enveloped by his wife and children, their faces awash with tears of relief and joy. The scene was a chaotic swirl of journalists and reporters, their cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward in anticipation. Jacob took a deep breath, steeling himself for the moment, and addressed one of the reporters, his voice resonating with a blend of gratitude and determination. "I stand here today not merely as a free man, but as living proof of the power of truth and the resilience of justice," Jacob began, his words carrying a weight of emotional significance. "I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to everyone who supported me throughout this ordeal: my devoted family, my steadfast lawyer, General Matthews, and all those who courageously raised their voices against the injustice I faced. This victory is not solely mine, it belongs to everyone who believes in fairness, dignity, and the fundamental right to be treated with respect, regardless of one's background. Although our fight is far from over, today represents a crucial stride toward a more just and equitable world. Thank you." Jacob's speech elicited a wave of applause from the gathered crowd, a tangible expression of solidarity and acknowledgement of his struggle. The weight of his long battle seemed to lift from his shoulders as he felt the embrace of collective support and the validation of his struggle. While the path to justice had been fraught with obstacles and heartache, the unwavering resolve and backing from countless individuals had transformed a period of profound adversity into a significant triumph. The public's reaction and the media's scrutiny left no room for ambiguity about the necessity for reform. The scandal surrounding Jacob's case led to the ousting of the police chief, who had been complicit in manipulating and conspiring against him. This pivotal change was a critical step toward restoring faith in the police department. In the wake of the chief's removal, a series of comprehensive reforms were set into motion. Under the stewardship of the new interim chief, the department began implementing measures designed to enhance transparency and accountability. Rigorous internal investigations were launched to identify and address any other officers implicated in corrupt or discriminatory practices. Officers underwent extensive training focused on civil rights and bias management to mitigate future injustices. Additionally, new policies were enacted to ensure continuous monitoring and review of police conduct, with a strong emphasis on fairness and respect for citizens' rights. For Jacob and his family, the release marked the beginning of a new chapter, unburdened by the shadow of past injustices. Jacob returned to his life with renewed vigor, dedicating himself to social justice initiatives and working diligently to ensure that the police department's reforms were not fleeting but embodied a genuine commitment to equity and integrity. His case had become a compelling illustration of how public outcry and collective advocacy can drive significant positive change. While the quest for justice continued, Jacob's victory stood as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring strength of truth. As we wrap up today's video, we've explored the complex dynamics of justice, bias, and accountability through the intense scenario at the gas station, and the unfolding investigation. From the tension between Jacob and Officer Jake to the impactful role of General Mitchell and Captain Carter, we've seen how deeply prejudice and systemic issues can affect individuals and institutions. What have you learned so far from this story? Share one key takeaway that you will apply to your own life in the comments below. We're eager to hear your thoughts and reflections. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insightful content.